Hello, my name is Teddy Wafula and I'm a software engineer, and I would like to take you through a quick tutorial on how to connect Python with MySQL for beginners. So in this tutorial, we're going to cover the basics of connecting Python to a database connection, that is MySQL, for anybody who would like to learn this. So in our quick intro, we are going to look at things you need before you start learning this tutorial. So before you do that, kindly subscribe to my channel so that you can get more updates in any upcoming tutorials. So let's get started. So the first thing that you'll need is MySQL installed on your machine. So to confirm that, you go to your terminal or console and type MySQL and as your username and as password. If you have a password, you enter the password, and it will give you instructions like these ones to show you that MySQL is installed. If it's not installed, you can go to dev.mysql.com. Then there's an installation guide section where you can find installation instructions for your operating system, even if it's Windows, Microsoft, or Mac OS, or Linux. Another thing that you need installed on your machine is Python. So to confirm that, you can go to your terminal or console or CMD and type Python. It will give you a version that you have installed on your machine. It can be 3.7 or 3.6 or 3.5 or 2.7. Most operating systems like Linux ones come with already installed a Python, so you do not need to install. So if it's not installed, you can go to python.org/downloads and do check how installation is done. There's Windows, there's Linux, there's Mac OS. So basically, those are the major requirements for you to get started with this tutorial. Another thing that you might require is the text editor or an IDE where you'll be writing your code. So for me, I prefer using a PyCharm because PyCharm has got shortcuts and it comes pre-installed with some plugins that you can use. So here it is. Here's how it looks like. So if it's your first time and you have not downloaded PyCharm, you can go to jetbrains.com pycharm/download section. There's Windows, there's Mac, there's Linux. So you can install the installation instructions. For me, is the open source one, which is free. That can get you started in this tutorial. So basically, you require those three items for you to get started on this tutorial. Now that you have all the tools set up on your machine, you are going to open your favorite text editor. For my case, I'm using PyCharm, so that you can start a new project. So there it's opening. So this is how the workspace looks like. So I'm going to go to File and New and create a new project. So I'm going to call it Python MySQL tutorial 1. I'm going to use a virtual environment. A virtual environment ensures that all the libraries and files are in the same folder. And then I'm going to use the base interpreter. An interpreter simply means the Python version that I'm going to use. So you have different versions. I'm going to use Python 3.7. So I can either start with the main.py file or not, or I can create mine. So I can just leave it the way it is and click on create. let's say a new window. So this is creating our virtual environment, and there it's done. So it starts off with this folder which has a main.py file, then the virtual environment which has got the libraries folder. So any libraries that I will need to use in this project, they'll all come here. So this is how it looks like. So for us to get started, let's go to the main.py file and remove everything and import the library that we want to use. For this case, we are going to use MySQL. So there it is. So just to confirm that it exists in our environment, you can click run up here. Then you get the error, no module named PyMySQL. So this means that this environment does not have this module. So you go to the terminal and install that module using pipe. So for my case, I'm using pipe 3. Install PyMySQL. So if I press enter, it says it has installed. So you can look at here, there's a virtual environment. It means our files will be installed in this virtual environment. So when you go to site packages, you'll see that PyMySQL is installed. So if you try and run again, there's no error. So this means that we have installed our library that we are going to use in this tutorial. So let's start off by creating our database, which is a demo for this project. So we are going through the command line of the terminal. Our terminal looks like this. So you go to MySQL, enter your username, the password, then you say create database demo, let's say demo 1, then you press enter. So there our database is created. So let's do a quick database connection through our text editor. So we'll put the connection inside a try except script, just to make sure that the connection is successful. If it fails, it gives us an error. So we say connection equals to PyMySQL.connect. So we have arguments here. The first will be your host name, which is, in my case, it's localhost. Then you have the username, because I'm using that. You can change to any that you have in your system. Then password. I don't use this username and password in production. It can be hacked. Then our database that we created is demo 1. Then you can say print connected successfully. On our except here, you can say except PyMySQL.error as E. Then we print E. It will be the message. Then you can exit our program here. So if you try and run, it will tell you our database connected successfully. So it means that our connection has been successful. So that's the first step. So we are going to move to the next step of now trying to insert records into our database. So we are going to create a student table through this script and insert the records into that students table. So to create a table, we are going to initialize a variable called create students table, and since it's going to be a long string or statement, we are going to use a docstring. Docstrings look like this. They can be used for comments, or they can be used to create long statements. So here we are going to say create, I can use capital letters, create a table students, then we say int let's say the id int 11 not null. It's an auto increment, and then it's gonna be a primary key. Then we say a name, it's a variable character of, let's say, 100 characters. And then we have the email, which is also a variable character of 100. You can add a not null if you like. And since it's a long statement, you can press enter. For indentation purposes, you can do this, press with one space. Then you can say age, let's say int 10, also say not null. Then you can say location text. So here we have our query to create our students table. So we are going to insert into the database this table. So we say with connection. This tells us if the connection is successful. So we say if with connection, we are going to use also a try except block. So I'm going to say try. So here we are going to initialize our cursor and say cursor is equals to connection dot cursor. So we are going to say cursor dot execute create a students table. So this means that it's going to write a query to initialize a query to insert data into the database. So here we are going to say print table created successfully. Except is going, we are going now to print our error message. So it's going to be by mysql dot error, say as e. So you can say print e. So you can print e, or you can also say table not created. Then you put a comma, then you say e. So when we run this, to say table not created, check your syntax at near at line 2. So if you go through this, so we didn't close with a bracket. So if you try and run again, says table created successfully. So this means we have our table in the database. So what we are going to do next, we are going to insert now our records into the database. What we forgot to do is to put comments on every section. So comments are put using either hash or docstring. So here we're going to say this is a database connection. You can say preparing database connection. Here we can say can use also hash and say preparing preparing query for student table creation. So these are very important when your project gets bigger, so it's easy for you to debug. So we're going to create another new file for just inserting data. So you can go to Python MySQL 1 here and click new and say Python file. So it's going to be an insert file. So here we are going to copy this and say import everything. So here we are going to say hash insert records into students table. So you can say with connection we create our query. You can say insert into students there are different ways. You can say set name equals to, you can use John Doe. Email equals to John Doe at test.com. Then we can use here we have age, then location. So you can say age equals to 20, location equals to New York. So you can still use a try except for block. MySQL dot error as e. You can say cursor dot execute. This prepares our statement to be inserted into the table. So you can say query. So we didn't initialize our cursor. So here you can say cursor is equals to connection dot cursor. So that's where our cursor dot query is, execute query is. And then we can print our e, or you can say data not inserted. Then we get the exact error message, which is e. So you can use that. Then we can print and say data inserted successfully. That's easy. So when you are done, you have to close the connection and say cursor dot close. Thus we are closing our cursor. And since we opened our connection, you can come here and say connection dot close. This helps us in garbage collection, so that the connection is not active when it's not being used. So if we click here, we go here and try right click and say insert, or Control Shift F10 to say data inserted successfully. So we can create another file just to show us that our data has been inserted successfully, just to query and give us the data that has been inserted into the DB. I'm trying to be as basic as possible so that I am not confused. This is a select.py, but as we get more advanced, you'll find that we can modularize our files. So here we can say can copy up to this section. You're familiar with this section, so our cursor will be equal to connection dot cursor. So you can use the try except block here by mysql dot error as e. So here we can say cursor dot fetch. So we have to write our query first. We execute it, then before we fetch it. So here we can say our query is equals to select from students table. So that's our students table. So we can say a cursor dot execute our query. Then we can say our data will be equal to cursor dot fetch one. Fetch one means we just want to fetch one data, one result set. Fetch all means we want to get all the result sets. So here we'll print data. Then if we have an error, we'll print error fetching records, then comma the exact error message, which is E. So if we try and run this, you will see this is the data that we inserted: 1 John Doe test 20 and New York. So it means that inserting and getting data from the database is working fine. So those are the basics of inserting data into the database using PyMysql, and selecting data from the database using PyMysql. So we are going to look at another way of inserting data into the database using strings as placeholders. So this is the way Python does uses something called %s or string formatters. So you can have a query like query equals to we are going to comment this. We are going to say insert into students, say set name equals to %s, email equals to %s. So these are what we are calling placeholders for the values. Then age goes to %s, then location equals to %s. Then you also define data, or let's say records will be equal to, so use a tuple for your data. So say the name can be picked email can be peter at test.com, age can be 23, location can be Delhi. So in our execute statement, we are going to put our records here. Then if you run this file, data will be inserted successfully. So this is another way of inserting data into the database, and is the ideal way. It helps in preventing SQL injection. So if we try and run this for selecting data, you'll see that our record is here. So this is one of the best way of inserting data into the database. So we are going to look also in another way of inserting many records in the database. So these are just one of them, of inserting one by one. So if you have like 5 records, what happens? So you are going to maintain this query statement as it is, but for the records, let's just comment this one out and say records will be equal to, you are going to have an array of data, then you put each data set in a tuple. So you say test1, that's the first name, then the email will be test1@test.com, then age 20, let's say 24, and the location, you can say Nairobi. The second record will be, say, test2, then we say test2@test.com, then we say 25, then we say we can put Brazil, can be a location. So we can work with those two. On our execute, we're going to comment that and say cursor.execute many, because there are many records. Then this is our query, our query above. Then here we have records. So when you click run insert, it will say data inserted successfully. When you go to select all our records, when you run the select file, it will show you all other records that we have inserted with this statement here for execute many. So this means executing many records. So I think we need to comment this, select records from students table. So this gives us many records. So we have looked at 3 ways of inserting data into the table. First, you enter directly the values in the query, then you separate the values and to use a string formatter to get the values. Then we have also looked at inserting many records at one go into the table. So we are going now back to select to see different options of selecting data from the tables. So we looked at one way of selecting records, which was selecting all the records from the database. So we are going to look at another option of selecting records from the database. So at first we're going to look at how to select one record from the database. So we're going to say data equals to cursor.fetch1. So if you print this, you'll only find the first record. So if you tweak your query, you can say order by ID descending. If you run, you'll find the last record. So this is one way of fetching data from the database. So you can also say I want to fetch only 2 records without even using the limit in a SQL statement. So you can say data equals to cursor.fetch many, but you say size equals to, let's say the default is normally 1, so let's say 2. So if you run this query, we'll only get 2 records, the first one, then the second one, depending on your SQL query, which you have ordered by ID in a descending one. So if we remove even this, order by ID, and we just run, you find that it starts with the first one, then the second one in the database. You can check ID1, ID2. So you can say you want to fetch like 3. What happens? We'll find 3 records, 1, 2, and 3. So these are some of the ways of fetching records from the database. So you might also want to find how many records have I fetched from the database. So here we can say we can print cursor.last, not last, like row count. So you can say number of records equals, then if you run this, you can say number of records equals to 4. So we have 4 records in our database. So that will give us a total count of the records, starting with depending on the query that you have executed. So basically those are the basics of select statements for my Python and MySQL. For insert, there's one thing that I need to show you of getting the last row that you have that has been inserted into the DB. So you can just maintain this, let's say 3, then let's say test4. Here we edit this, we edit that one. You can leave everything as it is. Then we can say print cursor with last row ID. Then here we can say last row in table, put a comma. So if you run this, you'll find that the last row in table is 6. So let's just confirm from this one. Let's say fetch let's say 10. I know I don't have 10 records. So as you can see, our last row or our last record has an ID of 6. So we normally do that so that you can maybe use that ID maybe to give back to the client side when you are done with an insert statement or an insert operation in your application. So basically those are the basics of inserting and selecting data from the database. So we are also going to look at how to update our records, already existing records in our database. So we are going to create a new file called update.py. A Python file, you can call it update. So here we are going just to copy this. Up to the cursor stage. And you are familiar with this as of now. So we are going to update our comments and say update records in students table. So here we are going to say is query equals update students set name equals we're going to use a string formatter, %s, let's say email equals to %s, where id, say id equals to 1, or we can also use a percentage s. So our data will be equal to, we use the tuple and say data equals to, let's say the name will be updated name, our email will be updated email at test.com, then our id, let's say 1. So here we'll say cursor dot execute the right query and then data. So we're going to put our data or our query into a try except statement, so that in case there's an error, we are able to catch it. So py.mysql.error, and we're familiar with this right now. So we copy this statement and paste it here. Then we print our error updating records, then the exact error message. So here we say print data updated successfully. So when that is, you can say cursor dot close, and we say connection dot close, then we exit. So if we try and run this query, it will say data updated successfully. So if we go and select the first statement, or we select the first statement, we just fetch one, we'll say we'll find updated name, updated email. So the records have been updated. So that's how we do an update of our records. If you'd also like to delete records from the database, let's create a new file called delete.py. So let's just copy this, paste it here. So what we're going to delete the first record. So we'll just change our query to delete. Let me remove this. Or we can say delete delete from students where id equals to percentage s. So our id here will be 1. So when you execute your query, you just use the same cursor.execute query statement. So you can say record deleted successfully. You can say error deleting record. So if we try and run this, you can say record deleted successfully. If we try and fetch all the records, then we'll see run select. So the first record is not there with ID 1, so it starts with ID 2. So this shows that our record has been deleted. So basically this is how we call inserting select, update and delete as CRUD. If you find something called CRUD, which means create, read, update and delete, so basically these are the 4 operations that are needed to carry out MySQL operations in Python. So if you like this tutorial, kindly subscribe, comment below, and you can also like so that you can be able to get other tutorials that I'll be posting weekly or 3 days per week, so that you can enjoy learning programming in the simplest and best way. So thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next tutorial. Thank you.